Welcome to SRG Insights, where we answer your questions about sales, sales management, and sales training. And today's question is,
how should I respond when a prospect asks for a discount?
well, thank you for that question, and it's one that we hear quite often. In fact, I think a lot of sales teams are challenged with that question of, boy, we're getting hammered, we continue to get asked for discounts, how are we supposed to respond to that? The first thing I would say is actually to respond with a question, which is, have we done a good enough job selling value before that discussion? Where are we in the sales process? Have we actually had an opportunity to understand the customer's problem, to really work through the impact of their problem and the impact of the solution that we could provide? Because if we haven't done that, then it's really premature to talk about price at all, other than qualifying, maybe budget terms. But if we're getting into a discussion about discounting too early in the process, they're probably just kicking tires, or they're seeing how much can I get now and maybe I get more later. So I'd really want to see, have we sold value? Have we gone through our sales process first before we're starting into any negotiations? The second question I'd ask is, perhaps we're talking to the wrong person. And what I mean by that is, typically when surveys have been done about buying behavior, the higher you go in the organization, the less price sensitive those buyers tend to be. And so what I mean by that is, those that are at the executive level or the C-level, really key sponsors of those initiatives, are concerned about how it's going to support their strategy, how it's going to accomplish their business objectives, how it's going to improve the overall business and margin, as opposed to cost per widget or an individual pricing discussion. So perhaps we're selling too low in the organization, and they're really most focused on that discount as a way of getting leverage over us. And the next area I'd be curious about is, why are they asking for that discount? And just by peeling that back a little bit, we can learn a lot, both about that buyer or sponsor, as well as learn about, what's behind it. What I mean is, are they asking because it's a budgetary constraint and they only have a certain set budget? Maybe there are creative ways we can work within that. Maybe the competition is given at a discount and they're asking us to meet the competition's price, even though they're not comparable solutions, but they still want us to meet that price. Maybe they just enjoy beating up the vendors, and so asking for a discount is something they commonly look towards. Or they just want to look good in front of their boss and show that they were able to squeeze an extra 10%. By asking some questions about, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Why is that so important? What are you going to do? How is that going to improve the situation here? We can learn a little bit about the interests behind their position of the discount, and maybe we can think about creative ways of solving that don't include just lowering our price. And that's really the final area I'd like to address, which is generating multiple options as a way of meeting a customer's expectations or their demands. Can really help in our negotiation leverage. And what that looks like is, if it's a budgetary constraint, but we find out that, well, that's just for this quarter, or that's just through the end of the year, maybe we can break that project up over a period of time, or maybe we can actually break up the components of it differently to satisfy that budgetary need. Maybe we can offset a lower price with larger volume and a longer term commitment, which is actually good for us. Now we're trading on equal value, and actually that's good for our business to get a larger order. So we can only do that if you're able to give this commitment to a larger volume. Or, we'll give you that discount, but only after you reach a threshold. So in other words, look at a rebate that might come into play. So I think by looking at creative options, we can really think about satisfying that, what sounds like a demand, but in a creative way that is much more collaborative and also satisfies our interests as well, which is not just going in and giving the discount. Unfortunately, what we often see is when the client says, hey, I'm going to need a discount, what does a salesperson say? Oh, where do you need me to be? Which is the exact opposite message we want to be sending. That signals that they can get a discount, that if they get this much, how much more can they get? And it's a slippery slope, and all of a sudden you really are competing as a commodity, and that's not where we want to go. So hopefully these were some ideas. How you respond to that question, hey, I need a discount? The first answer is just say no. Thank you.